Over the past year, I've talked about navigating the changing buyer sentiment towards the real estate market. This change was really driven by economic uncertainty, Canada's relationship with the US, tariffs and a trade deal, high interest rates, the high cost of living, and changes to immigration and population. But over the last year, as I'm sure everyone has noticed, AI has accelerated and improved really quickly. It's gone from a glorified search engine to creating really useful and powerful tools. As I started using AI myself in my everyday personal and working life, I've noticed changes to how I work, to how I think, to how I interact with technology, and I'm getting better at using it. And as more and more AI tools become available, I'm also open to allowing it disrupt how I do things. The thing is, so are businesses and enterprises. We're still really early in figuring out how AI will impact work, but a lot of us working age professionals are aware that we're maybe on the cusp of a recession here in Canada, and businesses will often use a bad economy to clean up its enterprise and make itself more efficient through layoffs and restructuring. With AI's ability to quickly fill in those gaps, how many jobs are safe? How many jobs are going to be coming back? With a sizable portion of the potential homebuyer pool, I think this is deep in the back of their minds, and I wonder how much, even if not verbalized in such a manner, is driving buyer sentiment right now. So I think more than any of the economic factors that I mentioned at the start of this video, the tariffs, the trade deals, interest rates, etc., in 2026 and beyond, I think that it could be AI that will be undermining buyer confidence the most. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the biggest threat to the future of work, which is AI, how I think that it will impact our country, and what it will do to the future of work. And of course, I'll wrap up this video with how the real estate market is performing this pre-spring season. Now let's begin. In my career previous to real estate, I worked as an industrial engineer for Shoppers Drug Mart, planning store and pharmacy labor hours, looking at workflows and trying to find ways to reduce the number of man hours that were needed in the stores. The single largest cost of the business wasn't the cost of rent or inventory. It was by and far labor. That is the number of people that you need in the pharmacy, in the cosmetic departments, and in the front store. Every year, we tried to reduce the number of man hours while maintaining or improving the revenue. As a side note, it was during that time that I saw the writing on the wall. Unless you justify your necessity to a business, higher ups will eventually look to get you out, which started my path for a career change, and long story short, for how I got into real estate. In Canada, the highest cost for nearly any business is the cost of human capital. Even when you're building a house, the material cost might only be about 40% of the cost of the build, while the labor is most of the cost at about 60%. Canada has an extremely overeducated population. I think this is because we're a country full of immigrants. Education is a common denominator that we can all point to and say, hey, that's a good thing. It's status raising, which if you're an immigrant, you are by definition non-native, which for many can feel that you're of lower status. It's quantifiable. You get an A or a B, you get a master's degree. It's perceived as low risk with a perception of high reward. You can qualify for a better job. And there's not really such a thing as too much education. Your PhD in medieval poetry just means that you're really smart and dedicated. In summary, education is never seen as bad. But more education has a three-way detrimental effect. First, of delaying earnings until later in life. That's obvious, but if you go to university, that's 4 years of earnings that you're missing out on. Second, the majority of students are accruing debt or reducing savings. And third, you're living as a student and therefore are delaying adult life, which is a growing problem with this generation. Because of this, institutional education is completely oversaturated and not what we need more of. We have too many bachelor's degrees competing for the thinning number of white-collar jobs. And high supply of white-collar workers and low demand means wages can stay relatively low. Add to this, we're a high taxation country that has high home prices relative to incomes, which most people leverage the heck out of themselves to get into. This leads to a lack of expendable income, meaning that outside of our basic needs like grocery and housing, we don't have much money to spend on things, which is why so many companies have gone out of business in Canada, especially in the last 5 years. There's simply not enough money actually turning in the economy. This is what is called low productivity. The companies that are thriving in Canada, grocery stores like Costco, Loblaws, and Walmart, and discount consumer goods stores like Dollarama and Winners. My beef with institutional education is that it's all about preparation. Study this, write a report on that, write a test. And for most computer-based work, when you move into the workforce, you kind of end up doing similar stuff. Study these numbers in Excel, create a PowerPoint deck on your findings. And of course, let's have a meeting on how we should have meetings. But what I've learned through my years of working in sales is that real business comes down to three things: making decisions, taking action, and building influence by growing your human network. Even in large corporations, the executives all get paid big money because they do those three things. Yet most people who do computer-based work are not prepared for this level of responsibility. AI is posing a fundamental change to how we work, and we're all confused on where it's going to lead us. Here are two threads that I found both arguing for and against the evolving AI need. Personally, I think that the future of people's jobs are going to be dependent on those three components: decision-making, action-taking, and human interaction. I think that return to office is going to be completely necessary for that, and that those of us who do purely independent computer-based work will need to lean into either producing more, i.e. taking more action because the threshold has been lowered, or interacting and influencing more people. I think the future of being successful in your work and career is either leaning so far into AI that you're outputting the equivalent of 2 or 3 times the amount you were previously doing, or it's leaning more into human-based interaction and collaboration, or somewhere in between that spectrum. But even with higher levels of production, I hesitate in saying going heavy with AI is the way to go. As an example, when it comes to obvious AI-generated social media content that I come across online, I find myself naturally becoming turned off by it. I skip over it more quickly. I give it less credibility. And as an example, I was watching an Instagram reel where this guy had actually filmed himself talking, and I didn't doubt that it was actually him, but he had generated his script using AI, using the short, punchy sentences where every sentence sounds like a headline. And I got really sick of it really quickly. I couldn't process what he was talking about, the point that he was trying to make. It was without human emotion, and it lacked a natural arc because it just was a foreign style of talking that we wouldn't do person to person. I see this a lot in short form written content these days, like in Threads, X, and even in various email content that I receive. And so just based on this early aversion to what I feel myself having, obviously we're going to need to evolve how we work, but I think our futures are going to be in being more human, which you could argue we've been moving further away from the last 6 years or so. Now, where does this take us in the real estate market? Obviously, I don't know. AI is impacting so much in business today that a lot of very profitable and prominent SaaS companies, software as a service companies like Salesforce, HubSpot, Adobe, Duolingo, they are actively tanking in the stock market today. But if investors are so spooked about how the AI play will impact these very profitable businesses, how can we say that this is not impacting buyer confidence in the real estate market, even if it's not actively being reported? Now, before I wrap up this video, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least talk briefly about what's happening in real estate today. We finished January with low numbers, just 1,074 sales across Toronto, making it the second weakest January in 30 years. But worse than that, average prices are down in Toronto by 3.75% year over year and 6.5% across the GTA. This is partly due to the higher than typical ratio of condos that sold in the last month, amounting to 53%. The annual makeup of sales in 2025 was 47% for condos. This increase in condo sales is likely driven by value returning to the condo market and first-time homebuyers also jumping in. On the ground, I'm seeing fewer sellers listing their properties other than those that are resolute on selling, compared to last year where I saw more sellers testing the waters. But as well, I'm seeing buyers taking their time in their search. Few buyers seem to have high urgency and instead are seeking the right balance of value and fit for their needs. While I'd still describe the market as a buyer's market, things aren't as bad as they could be due to lower inventory levels for freehold houses, especially for updated move-in ready homes. I'm hopeful that as the weather warms up, we see more buyers come out to search for a home in earnest. I know for a fact that with some upsizers, the lack of inventory is holding them back from finding the right home that they would be willing to move for. And since they're not listing their current homes until they find their next home, that lack of a lower price starter house is also what's holding fewer sales from happening. For this February, I'm expecting sales numbers to be similar to last year's at around 1,500 transactions in Toronto, but I'm also expecting average prices to continue to be lower year over year. So far this mid-February, we are trending with more condo sales compared to houses. So that will, of course, weigh more heavily on lower valued real estate. If you're looking for help in real estate this spring, you got questions on the market, or are looking to understand what the next major events are going to be, I'd be happy to connect with you. Feel free to schedule a call with me by clicking on my Calendly link below. This wraps up my market update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.